when I was thinking what I was going to talk about here, I realized how untypical situation this is nowadays. Because I had to decide on the theme something like 3 months ahead. This is something that was unheard of at the Buddha's time. This never happened. I suspect that nobody was even planning so long ahead anything. And definitely discourses or lectures like this has never been planned, beforehand. It was always spontaneous. The Buddha and his enlightened disciples would just travel around the area where they were living and would encounter various people, and all the teachings were given inspired by that very moment. So nothing was planned ahead. And it is why quite often those teachings were very effective, because the Buddha had special abilities. He was able to see very clearly what his listeners needed to hear. So quite often at that time, even some people became enlightened during listening to the Buddha's teachings, because he knew what exactly the right words to say for them to actually see the truth for themselves. So that was the power, positive power of words then to lead in the right direction. Nowadays we have to, the way the lectures like this are announced, placed on the website and so on, so they have to be planned beforehand, right? But how do I know 3 months ahead whether you actually need to hear what I'm going to say here? I cannot know that, right? So it's little like arbitrary, deciding on the theme so far ahead. And the reason this theme came into my mind, because at that time when John contacted me through email and asked me to suggest a theme, at that time I was actually thinking about it. At that time it was relevant for me, So that is why I suggested this theme. Sometimes, during my time, last 3 or 4 years in New Zealand and Australia, several times I went for what we call wandering practice. I had never done that before, even though it's quite common in Sri Lanka in some monastic circles to, from time to time, to simply leave the monastery and go without much planning and without knowing what you encounter, where you are heading. So I was attracted to such practice, but in Sri Lanka I had not been able to do it really because of the heat. I'm from the Czech Republic. Central Europe is quite cool, and in tropical countries it's quite difficult for me to move. So instead I usually stayed put in one place for a longer time and was meditating there, and I never managed to convince myself to actually do it. But in New Zealand is surprisingly cold, cool. It's even colder than my own country, so that's what I liked. And eventually I had to leave the monastery where I was, so I decided to actually try it out. And this was quite untypical because New Zealand is not a Buddhist country, it's not a Theravada country. So I didn't know how it would go. And maybe you know, or maybe you don't, but we are not allowed to use money, to accept, possess, and handle money. So I had to go like out of the monastery to unprotected circumstances without this safety of being able to buy something if I need it. So we get food from lay people, from people around with the help of alms bowl. It's like big bowl. And in New Zealand, I did it. Every morning, I went to shopping center somewhere or supermarket, and I was standing there in front of food shop with this alms bowl and just waiting. And also traveling, like moving through New Zealand, I used hitchhiking mostly, also a little bit of walking during COVID, you know. So I didn't know whether anyone would be brave enough to stop, you know, and take some stranger, maybe many people fearing that they might be infected and stuff like that. So it was kind of a situation with ultimate insecurity, but it worked out well. As you can see, I am still alive. So I received plenty of food. Sometimes I had to wait a little bit longer to receive lift in a car, but it worked very well, you know, in New Zealand. And then this year I also tried out 6 weeks in Australia, traveling like this from, I started at the Gold Coast and I was moving along the coast down to Melbourne, about 2,000 kilometers. In New Zealand, one summer it was 3,000 kilometers and similar distances within a few weeks, you know. So very easy. But this practice taught me to stop planning, you know. I sort of learned through this also to stop planning. I almost don't plan more than like 1 day ahead. But in some situations, someone asks me to plan longer, you know. So I just make a plan for them to satisfy them, but then I usually forget about it. And then the situation comes, I just respond to the circumstances. So I basically even sometimes don't remember this plan which I gave to that person, you know. But in this case, of course, I had to remember. So I did think what exactly I'm going to say, because it's not easy theme to talk about. It's for the very first time I'm going to talk about it. And so I will try to keep it as practical and simple as possible. It sounds a little bit kind of too philosophical to my taste, you know, about the nature of words and concepts and so on. So I need to make sure it's as relevant to you too as possible. Now, sometimes I will just ask questions without giving answers, and you can try to find your own answers to those questions. Sometimes questions come spontaneously, or answers come into the mind spontaneously by just asking a question and then waiting, you know, without thinking about it. So that's what I recommend with some of those questions. So I encountered this strange thing already at the beginning when I started meditating. My first teacher was briefly mentioning this kind of thing that many people don't differentiate between words and reality. Have you heard about this problem before? No, not really. Huh? I also didn't know exactly what this teacher meant, but he never explained it in detail. He just mentioned it, and in meditation, when we practice the Buddha's teachings, eventually we need to reach a stage when this distinction between words and the reality that those words are supposed to represent becomes clear, becomes more pronounced, and becomes realized. But I realized through the years how many people don't actually have this distinction in their minds, and they are sort of stuck on the level of words, and they don't have this sense of distinction between a word and that thing. I will state few examples of this kind of problem. When I finished with this wandering in Australia this year, I ended up in monastery west of Melbourne. That was the last place before I returned to New Zealand. And I had some discussion with my friend Arana Bihari, a Sri Lankan monk, who is a very nice monk, good friend. But at some point he mentioned some kind of practice or teaching which he disagreed with, and he said, "This is not Buddhism." And I said, no, this is exactly what Buddhism is. No, this is not Buddhism. No, this is exactly what is called Buddhism. And I knew immediately that problem was in the way he understood this word Buddhism. So I didn't continue with this argument very long. I just told him briefly, Buddha didn't teach Buddhism, And then he stopped and he started thinking about it, So this is one of the problems. Sometimes people keep arguing about something for a long time without realizing that the problem lies with how they understand the words they are using. That both two sides understand the same word in different way. And that is from which the argument actually arises. And how is it possible that they don't realize that the problem is in this? That's because they are not aware of the words and meaning behind them. So this is one subtle example. Another example of the power of words to mislead, in this case, is how it happened that India was partitioned. It's quite amazing that invention of a word which doesn't have substance underneath it can lead even to things like partition of a state. Now that's exactly what happened. I recommend you to watch a brief video. It's this TED educational video, 5 minutes, about this historical event, how India was partitioned. And according to this video, it appears that the reason why it happened was that British invented new religion. When they came to India as colonial power, they invented, by the way, Buddhism. Buddhism had not existed before British came up with this word, It's just the word Buddhism. It didn't have any substance then, Nobody had heard about it in countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, India, Japan, Tibet. Nobody had heard about Buddhism before British came up with this word. And similarly, they also invented Hinduism. Hinduism also had not existed before. So they created these words simply to make it easy for themselves, because before they had come to India, there were many, many different religious cults and religious beliefs in different places. It wasn't just one religion. Basically, every place, every town had different religion. So there was this identity of Hindu, Hindu identity. And all these religious cults and beliefs coexisted together peacefully. There was because they were all like small groups, So they could not really hate each other because small group would have to hate all of them, So that would be difficult. But because for British it was too much diversity, they needed a simple umbrella term to simply talk about those subjects of their administration, So they created this term Hinduism, and it was easy to say those Hindus, meaning non-Christians, pagans, they don't know really what is going on, so and so on. So they created this term Hinduism, and eventually, as the time passed by, the people, native people in India, actually accepted this term and lost the awareness of it as being something artificial and basically non-existent. There is no one religion that could be called Hinduism. That is why also experts, by the way, some time ago I read just introduction in the book about Hinduism, and this expert, academic professor, in introduction he said, if you are confused about Hinduism, don't worry, all the experts are. But he probably also is not aware that Hinduism is confusing because it's a completely artificial term. It doesn't exist, basically. There is no one religion underneath. Nevertheless, native Indians eventually accepted this term, and through it, Hindu identity was created. Eventually, this identity solidified in their minds, and now there was a majority of Indians were Hindus, and the other minority were Muslims. And eventually it led to this terrible conflict which led to partition of India. I don't know how many millions had to move across borders in both directions, and through this process many 100,000 were killed or died. So just through this creation of this one term, this eventually happened. Quite astounding, isn't it? Now, a similar situation is with Buddhism. Also, before British invented it, it had not existed. Nowadays, after 200 years within existence, almost nobody is aware of the fact that Buddha didn't teach Buddhism, and that almost every person understands this term differently. So there are as many Buddhisms, I say, as there are Buddhists. And through this also various arguments arise, like the one with my friend, but it was very short because I knew immediately what was happening. Through my meditation training, I became aware just through 2 or 3 exchanges where the problem is, that it is in understanding of this word. So I'm now going to suggest little contemplation for you. By the way, the word Buddhism appeared in writing for the first time in 1801 in a book, according to my information. So only in 1801 in writing there is first mention of the word Buddhism. So it's 23 centuries after the Buddha. And now they are talking about early Buddhism. So it's talking about something that never existed. And they are not aware of it, because it became so ingrained, this completely artificial term in the minds of people, that they lost the awareness of the difference between the word and reality. Reality is different beliefs, different cultures, different religions in different countries. Tibetan culture, Tibetan religion has almost nothing to do with what the Buddha was teaching. It's a very small part of it, which comes directly from what the Buddha was teaching. I'm not criticizing it. It's just fact. It's Tibetan culture. Nothing wrong with cultures, right? But unfortunately, people are not aware of it, because this awareness of the difference between the word Buddhism and real thing, Tibetan culture, is almost completely lost. So now this contemplation, actually I am going to talk mostly about spoken words, not written text. There is a difference. And at the Buddha's time, nothing was written down, so it was always an audio thing. So what is actually the speech, language, words? What is it? It's primarily just sound, right? Someone who doesn't understand English, if he listens or she listens to this kind of speech, it's just sound, right? It doesn't mean anything. Now, how it happens that this sound means to someone something, that it is capable of communicating ideas, how it happens. Very strange, huh? Now, imagine that you are back shortly after you were born. So at that time, a child doesn't have any vocabulary in the mind. The child experiences the world without mediation of the words, without being able to describe it, right? So can you imagine how completely different situation that is? Completely different experience, right? Now there is this interesting discussion whether when a child is born, whether it's completely like tabula rasa. Do you know this term? Blank or blank slate, I think. Or whether there is something there already. If not, if it's completely blank slate, then everything is acquired through social conditioning. That's one side of argument, nurture or nature, I think. So either one extreme is complete nature, or nurture, sorry, and if it, on the other side is this argument that it's all innate. Now, the interesting position coming from Buddha's teachings, because we believe in rebirth, so it's very kind of literally what it was originally, this blank slate, because it was like plate with the wax on it, and it actually means erased slate. So there was something written on it, on this wax before, but when they want to write something else, they erase it through heat or something, right? So it's almost literally same with children, because according to Buddha's teachings and our beliefs, sometimes experience, there was something before. So when the child is born again, actually there is something on this slate, but it's sort of slightly erased. So, and what was there before, it would be normally called innate, but it's not actually innate. It's also nurture, but from the past lives. So it's kind of very interesting variation of this. So, but anyway, also psychology already had some experience about it, and they know that even when the child is born, like there some kind of linguistic structures are already there. They were able to actually show it through experiments. So, but they are kind of sort of slightly erased. So, but because some basic linguistic structures are already in the mind, like innate, that is why children can learn very quickly, language. It's extremely fast, basically, the way they are learning. But anyway, how they are learning? It's through hearing this kind of strange sound, and certain sounds are always heard in connection with some kind of experience regularly. So that is how the connection between word and experience happens eventually. So eventually they understand that mom or mother, what that means, because it's always connected with the experience of that person. And similarly with everything else. Eventually, when they acquire some little vocabulary, the other words are understood and acquired through context, through connections with the words. So in this way, the sounds representing words are a little bit removed from experience. At first, it's always direct connection of a certain sound, like mom, with experience. Later, when the other words are understood through connection with other words, then it's a little bit removed, And I don't know exactly how it happens that many people eventually kind of lose connection between words and experience, and sort of a little bit like withdraw from real experience and live in the world partially, more or less, in the world of concepts. So now what I understand as concept, there is a word as some kind of strange sequence of sounds connected to experience, and then there is kind of mental image of what that word means, in the person's mind. So when a person hears this word, this mental image comes into the mind. It's not direct experience. And that is, I think, the problem. So this kind of disconnect of vocabulary concepts from a real world can lead to all sorts of problems, some of which I already mentioned. Now, what to do about this? No, I was thinking whether it is what can one do with it if for instance, if I notice that someone is like this, is really far away from really experiencing and is lost in the world of concepts and words, what to do about it. And I think it's not very far from being enough to just tell him, you know, that there is this kind of problem. Because, yeah, just telling him or her doesn't help. And such a person would even know, that wouldn't know what I am talking about, you know, because they are not aware of this kind of distinction. So I think it's actually it can be only overcome through long-term spiritual meditation practice. So now I thought as a kind of, do you have any question about this? So I thought as a kind of epilogue or appendix, I have two appendices to this basic primary theme, which are how to overcome it. So a little bit like overview of meditation practice as it was being taught by the Buddha 25 centuries ago, as I understand it 25 centuries later. I practiced under the guidance of many teachers. You know, I think I had about 6 or 7 teachers throughout the years since 1992 when I started meditating. In 2000, I ordained in Lower Burma, and then as I had a few other monastic teachers. Eventually, I realized I had to rely on myself. So after receiving some useful teachings, sometimes also not so useful, you know, because it's kind of difficult, and some of the instructions were really misleading and sometimes even harmful, I have to say. But through some crises, through hitting a wall, I realized I had to change completely, and only within the last few years, some of the things started coming into my mind without even trying by themselves. I think if you keep collecting throughout the time, you keep collecting different elements of teachings from different people, you forget them, but they are there in the back of the mind, and when the time is ripe, they come into mind and suddenly are useful, you know. So, for instance, I heard interesting teaching from one Burmese Sayadaw U Revata Dhamma, who used to live in Birmingham, and we had him in the Czech Republic when I was still a layperson in 90s. Few times he came and he gave us meditation retreats, teaching there. And at the end of one of those retreats, I think it was in 1997 or something like that, he just makes sort of joke, saying something like, "Okay, you are all interested and wonder about what these stages of enlightenment are. You know, in Buddha's teachings, in Dharma, we have 4 stages of enlightenment. And what kind of experience you need to have to count as one on those stages. But you know, you can forget about it. Simply, if you have developed these spiritual faculties to 25%, then you are on the first stage, you know. Then 50%, second stage, 75%, third stage, and 100% full enlightenment. You know, it's called arahatship. So we thought, and he was talking about it as if it was like joking, you know, a little bit. And we laughed, and okay, and I forgot about it. But it came to me 20-something years later, and I realized it's actually directly from the Buddha's discourses. Also, I read little short suttas, which sort of mention this. You know, Buddha says, if someone has developed these faculties completely and fully, then he is arahat, fully enlightened. It's slightly less than third stage, slightly less, second stage, and so on. He mentions about 7 levels because there are some sub-levels in it. And I also read this chain of short suttas, something like maybe 7 years ago. And only now it came, both of these things came into my mind, and I understood, this is what I need to really care about. I don't need to care about special experiences, but I need to make sure that these spiritual faculties grow in me. So that was one of the things. So I do think that if a person has this kind of problem, being lost in the world of concepts and not slightly disconnected from real experience and not being able to detect when this plays a role, when it leads to conflicts or to misunderstanding with someone, that the only way to overcome this is through actually developing this spiritual path that the Buddha was teaching. And it can take quite some time before the results are clearly shown. So as a kind of one appendix, I would give you a little overview, and for this purpose, I prepared a little didactic tool. It's animation here, and I need this calm down. And so the Buddha, as he was teaching it, it's called gradual training. This kind of teaching is also almost completely, I would say, lost in Burma, where I ordained originally. So hopefully it will work. But it works, okay. So first I start with showing you this beautiful pagoda. Do you know what it is? No. This is called Shwedagon Pagoda. It's in Burma, in capital, on the hill. It's visible from everywhere. And it's the most significant monument for Burmese Buddhists. It can be compared to St. Peter's Cathedral in Vatican for Catholics, so this is something like that in Burma. And there are many different pagodas of different shapes everywhere where the Buddhists were active. But I like especially this shape because I created a simile, basically developing of the Buddha's path towards full liberation, and the top of this pagoda represents full enlightenment, full liberation, which we call nirvana. You probably know this word, right? So it's like going up, it's like attaining nirvana. And this kind of shape, which starts with a large foundation and then it gradually narrows itself, it represents gradual training. Buddha was teaching gradual training, so you need to start first with some basic practices, and only when you build up enough, large enough foundation of those basic practices, then you go up to upper layer, and then at that layer you adopt more advanced practices, and then as you progress, the layers are narrower and narrower, so it goes up faster and faster. But the formal meditation that is taught, like intense meditation that is taught in Burma in meditation centers, it only starts here, at this kind of level. Unfortunately, nowadays people go to meditation centers without making enough preparation, and they jump straight into intense meditation. That's what I did, So then it cannot simply work. So to demonstrate exactly what I mean by gradual training and by building basically in one's mind and heart this kind of beautiful pagoda, I made this animation. I need to enlarge it. So here we have kind of replica of this pagoda. Can you see it? And now in this first layer, the emphasis is on practicing generosity, giving. So every time we give something to someone in a need, it's like putting a brick into this foundation of spiritual training, you know. So these orange bricks represent acts of giving. And from time to time also the act of virtue, cultivating virtue, that's dark brown bricks, and white bricks are meditations or moments of presence. You know, the central quality in the mind which we need to develop is presence, or it's called also mindfulness in English. Mindfulness, or in my understanding, it's presence. But to build strong enough foundation, the most important and most emphasized element of practice is giving. So through giving, we are learning, we are teaching our heart in the ability to let go, to renounce, and to relinquish. That's very important, because in meditation then we are relinquishing many other things which are much more subtle. So first, on the coarse level, easier level, we need to train our heart in the ability to let go of possessions. So this may take some time. I sort of imagine that one layer is kind of one lifetime, you know, one lifetime on practice, and there are 5 levels, 5 layers before the meditation or practice, spiritual practice, proceeds to the next level. So now we have 5 layers. Still have time. I will turn it around because there is point here. There is point where the light is shining through it. So here it is. So it's better, more visible. So this is, I think, the last level of this basic preparation. You know, training to be able to renounce, relinquish. So after this comes a moment when person is ready to become a monastic. That's ultimate giving away, because as monastics, monks or nuns, we are supposed to give away all the possessions. You know, we give up houses, jobs, money, everything. So, and since then, because we fulfilled this part of training of giving, now the emphasis is on training in virtue. So we are learning first 5 years, 5 layers again. First 5 years we are learning how to be a good monastic, so how to keep all those rules, which we have, a few thousand of them. So we are supposed to live with a teacher and keep learning how to be a good monk first 5 years. So that's another 5 levels, where most of the bricks are dark brown, which means every time we say no to tendency to break a rule, that's like one brick, you know, again, in this building. And from time to time also meditation, that's white bricks, you know. But at this stage, most emphasis there is on this virtue training and now we are in upper level. After 5 years, monk is allowed to retreat to forest and to cave or to some complete solitude, and then emphasis is on meditation. So most of the bricks are white now, and of course along the way we also can give. If we have some extra requisite which we don't need, we are more than happy to share it with other monastics. And also after the mind was trained in virtue, there is not so many urges to break the rules, but from time to time it can happen. So that's when we say no to it, that's the brown brick here. And now we are in the last stage when the mind is quite pure. Hardly any time there is a desire to break a rule. And this is complete solitude. And this is the stage when the mind is training in the higher meditation states. So that can also take some time. And that's best done in complete solitude in the forest. That's the other appendix, which I'm going to show you some photos from these places where monks meditate in complete solitude in Sri Lanka. So this also may take some time, but it depends on how much a person practiced all of this in the past lives. Some people are born as meditation prodigies, so they can go up quite quickly because they had already built all of this in past lives, you know, accumulation of momentum of wholesome qualities. Sometimes it can be quick, sometimes it can be long. Even at the Buddha's time, even with such a perfect teacher as Buddha was, some monks needed the whole lifetime, basically, before they could attain enlightenment. Buddha mentions in some discourses that some monks can become enlightened during lifetime, but some of them have to wait until the moment of death, and they become enlightened in the process of dying. Well, patience. Yeah, patience is also extremely important, and basically one cannot influence how quickly it goes up through willpower. It completely depends on how much wholesome qualities one cultivated in the past lives. So in the practice, one needs to find the right level of effort, and once this right level of effort is there, nothing else can be done. So then you need to maintain it and be patient and wait until all the wholesome qualities of the mind grow to the sufficient degree. And at some stage, the mind reaches the point where the mental faculties, all the necessary needed for liberation are there, which Buddha called that the person is mature for liberation. So everything is there, but the person is still not enlightened. And then something needs to happen as a kind of trigger for the penetration to happen. So at the Buddha's time, it was often Buddha simply saying few words which he knew the person needed to hear. Power of words to lead, right words. Sometimes, if the Buddha was not available, some kind of strange things could have helped person to penetrate. For instance, in one of the books, scriptures, Nun Patachara describes how she attained full enlightenment. She probably knew that she was ready and mature, so she was trying hard, but could not, for longer time, could not attain. Could not penetrate the last layer of ignorance. And eventually she gave up, and she was just resting and on her seat or bed and was observing a candle with a flame, and it somehow happened that a draft entered the room and extinguished this flame. So as she was watching it, she became enlightened, which is kind of interesting because nirvana literally means flame going out. So this kind of event helped her it was a trigger for her to become fully enlightened. So this is now it's stopped, and this is a state of maturity. And then now something is needed to complete this peak, and nothing is happening. So we need to wait. I didn't finish this animation, so I need to work on it for some time and add this last cone. So that's the end of it. And now as a conclusion, I will show you a few photos. So these are kind of conditions in Sri Lanka which I had for solitary meditation, solitary practice. This is from when I had, I think, about 10 years. 10 years after having been monk. 10 years, I had fortune to practice on this extremely beautiful place. It's about 4 kilometers from the village. So every morning I had to descend. So this is just like introduction, and now I will show you the conditions. So this is where we started walking from the village. These are local village people which support a monk staying in this one kuti. It's just single kuti, one monk, no other monks, staying in complete solitude, having few square miles of rainforest for himself, no other people around. This is how subsistence farmers in Sri Lanka used to live. It's usually very dark in houses in Sri Lanka. This is because of camera making it appear light, but this is how it looks. Now I am eating from alms bowl, and usually in these houses I have to use a headlamp to see actually what I'm eating, because it's so dark, and in the bowl I don't see simply what I eat. So sometimes I put a headlamp to see. And now we are walking here across paddy fields towards the kuti. So it's 2 or 3 kilometers. And this is in February, so the fields are being prepared for sowing. So this is what they use for sowing, no machines but water buffaloes. And this is how they bring water on paddy fields. They put these dams, and on the side there is a channel which leads water onto these paddy fields. A few more paddy fields. These guys are getting ready for plowing. They tie them together so that they learn how to cooperate, because when they plow, they need to go together. So they spend some time together like this, and they have to agree what they are going to do. And this is finally reaching the kuti. So this is another one. Kuti means hut. Simple hut with just 3 walls. One wall is open, and this is some more supporters. This is chief kind of this village, and I think he's shaman also. He knows some kind of magic, I think. Pretty impressive character. And this is environment, extremely beautiful. When I went there for the first time, I thought that was paradise. And this is for walking meditation. It's kind of beach sand, and here a monk walks back and forth, meditating on the movement of legs, being fully aware of every step, and maintaining this awareness, if possible, continuously for 1 hour or so. And the interesting about this particular place was that I always had much more rice than I could possibly eat. So after eating, before noon, I shared this rice with the fish in this stream. So after 3 days, all the fish in the stream learned about it, so they gathered in this pool, several hundreds of them. So when I came to the shore, it was like boiling water, so many fish. And whenever, at any time of the day, whenever I appeared on the shore, the fish came, gathered, and was expecting, So it was very funny, because even when I was walking here, meditating, the fish kept swimming along the shore together with me, no matter how long I was walking there. So like our fish kept swimming back and forth like this. So I thought that was, I taught fish how to meditate, back and forth. Yeah, so most of these, actually all of them in this area have only 3 walls, because it was started by Danish monk Bhante Ñāṇadīpa, who was kind of ascetic and liked to live sort of in the middle of nature. And also it's much cheaper, because you don't need doors and windows. So just 3 walls. And this particular kuti is lifted because when there is rainy season, the water in the stream goes so high that sometimes it's just below the floor here, and there is also like powerful whirl there. Water is circling like this, and quite often it takes away some wood from this seat. So you can see there is just one plank here, and the rest is gone. So it always needs to be repaired after the rainy season. So very, very beautiful place. And in the morning we are going back to the village. So this is my friend here, taking pictures. Now they flooded the fields, and they are going to plow it. You can see here plowing. Subsistence farmers. And the eldest man in the village, and here they are welcoming me before we go here to this building to receive food and perform some little blessing. Now I'm giving blessing to them, chanting in this ancient language called Pali. Okay, so that's it. That was the second appendix to this talk. So this is the kind of place where a monk used to retreat at the Buddha's time, and few of them even at these times after they think they are ready for intense meditation. It's not always the case, and in my case it was not the case. Only after many years I realized that I needed to go back basically to more basic practices, not just intense meditation. One of the steps before intense meditation is mindfulness in daily activities. So whatever one is doing at any time of the day, whenever the mind remembers, aha, now I remembered, I should be present, I should pay full attention to what I am doing. So from that point, one needs to make some kind of right effort to maintain this presence, full awareness of what one is doing. Usually this kind of step is taught only before one starts meditating intensively, because one needs this kind of presence for the meditation to work and for not overdoing effort in meditation, for finding out how to meditation on the breath while remaining completely relaxed. That's the most, I think, tricky thing in meditation.